I'm far from alone in my love for the original BioShock. I'm not going to go into why I love it so much, because that has been done to death by just about everyone. I only bring it up because it made me concerned about BioShock Infinite. I mean, how do you follow something like BioShock up? That was an astounding, groundbreaking title that we're still talking about today. But thankfully, within minutes BioShock Infinite had alleviated all my concerns. It is without a doubt the one true successor to the Shock name, and in many ways it equals and even exceeds its predecessors. Is it the best of the lot? I don't know about that yet. I probably need to think about that for a good while. But what I do know right now is that if you haven't done so already, you should really go and play it as soon as you can. And here's 5 reasons why. Number 1, it's not BioShock 2. I of course don't mean that in a literal sense. There is already a BioShock 2. It was made by a different developer and it was kind of naff, so maybe less said about that the better. I'm talking more in a structural sense. It would be very easy to assume that the creative process for Infinite was just, get the original BioShock's design document, replace Underwater City with Sky City, replace capitalism with religion, and replace all the little girls with one teenage girl with a nice pair of knockers that look nice on the PR materials. BioShock Infinite is very much not that by any stretch of the imagination. While there are parallels to the original, it is very much its own beast with a unique story, unique world, and a unique set of characters. The general pacing and overall feel of the title is also substantially different. The past Shock titles have always had this kind of survival horror feel to them, whereas in Infinite things are far more relaxed. It frequently allows you to explore these big, wide open areas where there's absolutely zero combat, making it feel like anything but a simple rehash of what came before. I'd say, if anything, the game actually plays a little bit with your expectations of what BioShock actually means as a franchise. But to find out what I mean by that, I'm afraid you're just going to have to play it yourself. Number 2, it's immersive despite cultural hurdles. It was very easy for the original BioShock to engage with me, because it dealt with issues that were quite close to home. The idea of capitalism versus the welfare state is an extremely familiar sight here in the UK, whereas the racism and Christian zealotry present in Infinite, that's not something I'm too familiar with. It does play a factor in British politics, but it's nowhere near as big an issue over here as it is in the US. And then you've got this weird religious dogma surrounding the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, and we've certainly got zero equivalent for that. That could not be further away from anything I'm familiar with. Yet BioShock Infinite was still able to engage me on those subjects because it all felt so believable. And I don't mean that it was realistic, it certainly wasn't that. What I mean to say is that it was able to justify everything that happened within the rules of its own universe. I've always quite liked the idea of character development. This idea that you can begin to understand a character's motivations by observing them, and gradually, over time, they'll become more real to you. I like to think BioShock Infinite has world development. It feels like every aspect of the environment has been designed to tell you a little bit about why Columbia is the way it is, and why it's having the troubles it's having. It's lots of little things, like a shop that runs on an honour system, or watching downtrodden workers desperately bid for new jobs, or probably a bazillion other things that are so subtle they don't even register on a conscious level. It's through this that BioShock Infinite is able to get away with having such a silly world, where cities fly and crows shoot out your fists, and there's all kind of Inception-style nonsense going on everywhere. Admittedly, it can feel a bit artificial when everyone starts discussing the big topics of the day the moment you get close, and immediately stop the moment you walk away. But then again, I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm just saying it's better than the shallow cookie-cutter game environments that we're all used to at this point. Number 3, watching the world burn. Most games are obsessed with turning the player into an archaeologist of sorts. More often than not, you'll arrive on the scene long after the apocalypse has taken place, and then have to piece together the how and why of what happened through little story tidbits, usually in the form of audio logs that people inexplicably leave everywhere. And while I do enjoy this kind of storytelling, it would have been very safe for the developers of Infinite to rely on that winning formula once again. However, instead they took the bold move of allowing you to arrive in Columbia before its descent into violence, allowing you to experience that society at its prime, from the lavish luxury of the ruling class to the abject poverty of the downtrodden labourers who keep the gears of industry turning. You'll experience every angle of this weird white supremacist culture in shocking detail. In fact, I'd say at this point I probably know more about the socio-economics of Colombia than I do any real country. And the best part is, you get to watch it all fall apart. You get to see these ideals of fascism and intolerance that these religious nutjobs built their society around gradually rot away at the core of their false utopia until it crumbles around them in spectacular fashion. And seeing that process happen from start to finish brings with it a level of satisfaction that just hearing someone describe it on an audio log simply cannot compare with. Number 4, you get to feel like a boss. Firing even the most basic weapon in BioShock Infinite feels like you are firing a frickin' cannon. Even the vigors, this game's equivalent of magic spells, hit with incredible amounts of impact, as do the gruesome melee kills. And this is all accompanied by these wonderful dynamic audio cues that never fail to subtly whisper in your ear, you just did something really fucked up, and it was bad ass. The game also has far more of a combat puzzle than its predecessors, in part thanks to the far more open environments and the increased variety of weapons, enemies and powers. It's a level of variety I didn't actually appreciate until I started watching other people play the game, whereby I quickly noticed they were taking totally different approaches to each combat encounter than I was, often using powers or weapons that I didn't even consider on my playthrough. What I'm trying to say here is, even if the story wasn't as amazing as it is, BioShock Infinite would still function perfectly fine as a very solid shooter on par with contemporary classics such as Halo or Call of Duty. In fact, it almost makes me a little sad that the multiplayer mode from BioShock 2 hasn't made a return. Almost sad. Almost. And finally, number 5. There are 2 absolutely amazing characters. Pretty much any review you're going to read of this game is going to pile heaps and heaps of praise on both the protagonist Booker DeWitt and central character Elizabeth, and quite rightly so. The closest thing we get to genuine male-female interaction in video games these days is a strong implication that the female is going to get a hot dicking as soon as the credits roll. But Elizabeth isn't just a sex object, and Booker isn't just a generic musclehead. They're far more than that. Blah 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 blah, Disney liked animation, blah blah blah, Troy Baker is amazing. Yeah, whatever. In my book, it was 2 completely different characters that really stole the show in BioShock Infinite: Rosalind and Robert. This mysterious duo often appears in the most unlikely of places and are categorised by their utter indifference to the protagonist, as well as their obsession with postulating on games of chance and mind-bending metaphysics. They are truly fascinating to behold, and I really don't want to use much footage of them here because the few fleeting moments you spend with them in BioShock Infinite are some of the highlights of the game, and I'd hate to rob you of that. Their almost symbiotic relationship echoes the classic characters of Tom Steppard's Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, with dialogue so silky smooth yet full of hidden depth that it actually almost makes a mockery of the fantastic chemistry between Booker and Elizabeth throughout the game. I'd even say if there's one thing that's going to stay with me about BioShock Infinite, it's not going to be the satisfying combat, the beautiful world of Columbia, or the moving story of a young woman's quest for freedom and identity. It's going to be these 2 weirdos. And you know what? That's great. That's really great.
Yes.
Bird.
Or the cage.
Or perhaps the bird.
Nothing beats the cage.
He's to it. How do... Never mind.
Only time will tell if BioShock Infinite will be as genre-defining as its predecessor, but I'd say the smart money's still on it being pretty near the top of a lot of people's Game of the Year list. And as far as I'm concerned, it stands proudly alongside BioShock 1 and System Shock 2 as one of the greatest games I've ever had the privilege to play. And now you know why.